Cathy Engelbert is out after months of mounting pressure, skating media coverage, and a full-blown player of all boiling over in public. WNBA commissioner has been removed. Aussie from the league. She was supposed to be leading into its next era, and the final nail Sophie Cunningham in an emotional, fiery exit interview. Cunningham, do a few athletes ever dare to do? She aimed directly at the top leadership that doesn't understand basketball has no place here, she said with a kind of roar that doesn't come from PR coaching, it comes from pain. And she wasn't alone. Players across the league were already speaking up, but Sophie's words didn't just add fuel to fire, they were the match. And Cathy Engelbert, she was already standing in the gasoline. It was a long time coming. From the moment Caitlin Clark in a delete, it became painfully clear how ill-equipped leadership was to handle the explosion of interest, the level of scrutiny, and most importantly, the responsibility of protecting its players. Color became the most watched athlete in the league overnight. But as the lights got brighter, the cracks and foundation grew wider. If you're here for the real story and not filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. Rob Angel's plays went unchecked, referees lost control, and through it all the silence from Engelbert's office was deafening, while fans and analysts begged for clarity, transparency, or just the basic acknowledgement that officiate was wildly inconsistent. Engelbert doubled down on vague corporate speak and weak public statements. The league stars, meanwhile, were getting shoved into walls. Cunningham had seen enough, and unlike the front office, she wasn't about to stay quiet. Cameras, her words carried weight, because it came receipts, miscalls on safety. Yeah, zero accountability. Sophie's criticism wasn't his personal, it was professional, a demand for basic safety, respect, and competence. And in a moment that will be remembered as a turning point, it was loud enough to finally crack the illusion of control at league headquarters. Within days, the dominoes fell. Fan outrage surged, media figures piled on, sponsors got nervous, and suddenly the boardroom had no choice. Cathy Engelbert was quietly pushed out, her leadership team to detach, too dismissive, and far too late. The league and talk about growth and billion-dollar media deals all day, but none of it matters without trust. Cunningham's mic drop moment exposed a fundamental truth. Players are not commodities, they are the league, and when they speak with unity and clarity, even the commissioner doesn't stand a chance. Now, with Engelbert gone in the 2026 he be looming, the WNBA faces its most critical reset in decades, because what Sophie Cunningham ignited wasn't just a backlash, it was a revolution. It started with one interview, one microphone, one player who refused to keep quiet. Sophie Cunningham didn't just voice frustration. She cracked open a wall of silence that had been holding the WNBA hostage. Her words were sharp, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. The leadership of this league is failing its players, and not just in small ways, in critical foundational ones. Poor officiating, no accountability, unsafe conditions, performative leadership. Cunningham didn't name names out of emotion. She was specific. She called out Commissioner Cathy Engelbert directly, and she wasn't alone. Within hours, the wave hit Nephis, a coyote of the torch, and lit up, saying straight up to the WNBA has the worst leadership in the world. Lisa Leslie, one of the game's most respected legends, added her voice, not just echo the players, but to validate them, to say this isn't new, it's just finally public, and now it's official. Cathy Engelbert is no longer commissioner of the WNBA. Let that sink in. A player-lead movement just removed the most powerful executive in the league. Not a union, not a board vote, not a quiet executive reshuffle. This was player pressure from the court to the press conference to social media, and the league cracked, because reality is this: you cannot run a professional sport, George League, without the trust of your athletes, and Engelbert lost that trust completely. This didn't start with Caitlin Clark, but a rise exposed a fault lines from the moment Clark and in the league, the spotlight intensified. Ratings surged, ticket sales exploded, casual fan became in bed. Did the WNBA had what every lead dreams of: mainstream momentum? And how did leadership respond? With silence, with neglect, would an absolute failure protect not just Clark but all players? Called the crossfire, the league's newfound attention. Game after game, Clark was targeted hard, foul, those cheap shots, fights breaking out around her. And while debates whirled on the internet, one person stayed conspicuously quiet: Engelbert. No statements, no officiating reforms, no protections. Sophie Cunningham called what was cowardice. She didn't dress it up, she didn't soften the blow. She looked straight into the camera, and so would the entire locker room had been whispering for months. Leadership is not just failing, it's dangerous now, and that message hit harder than any PR memo could have, because Cunningham wasn't just speaking for herself, she was speaking for every player who's watched Danger's play go unchecked, for every player fined for reacting emotionally to bad officiating, for every woman source a smile and press conferences while our safety and dignity were pushed to the side. Then came the fans, the media, everyone jumped in. Stephen S. Smith, Scott Van Pelt, entire panels on ESPN. Suddenly Cathy Engelbert was no longer a faceless executive. She was a story, and not a good way. Criticism from players is one thing, but when fans start organizing petitions, when sponsors start asking questions, when legends start piling on, that's the kind of pressure no commissioner survives. And so the announcement came quiet, short, no ceremony. Cathy Engelbert has stepped down as commissioner of the WNBA, effective immediately. No long-winded goodbye, no tribute, just a polite exit from a job she was no longer welcome to hold. The lead try to frame it as a transition, but we all know what is really was a forced exit, a last-ditch move to stop the bleeding before it spilled into the upcoming CBA negotiations. Because that's what was next. The 2026 collective bargaining agreement had already been looming. Players and started hinting at a lockout, and now that lockout looked all but guaranteed. Heat of Engelbert remain in charge. This wasn't just about leadership style, it was about governance failure. The players didn't trust the league to protect them, they didn't believe their voices were being heard, and they weren't going to play under someone who dismissed them. Engelbert's legacy will be defined by what she didn't do. She didn't establish clear officiating standards, she didn't hold referees accountable, she didn't defend her players publicly when they were being dragged the media or targeted on the court, and she didn't communicate. She vanished in the moments leadership was most needed. The league and talk all want about media deals and rising team valuations, but Cunningham, Collier, and every other player who spoke out reminded the world of one essential fact: this league runs on the players. Now commissioners, not brands, not TV contracts, the players and product. They are the talent, they are the reason people show up. And when they speak, you listen. If not, they'll organize, they'll speak louder, they'll bring the entire structure down if they have to, because that's the era we're in now. Player reform is no longer a trend, is the standard, and this isn't just a WNBA moment, it's a blueprint, a model for every professional sports league. Try to ride a wave of growth, both without respecting the people creating it. This revolt wasn't about ego, it was about safety, fairness, representation, and the right to play in a league that doesn't see you as disposable. Now the WNBA stands at a crossroads. Engelbert is gone, but the problem she left behind aren't a fish. Head crisis still needs real reform. There needs to be independent review, better training, and actual accountability. When officials cause players or health or teams or wins, player safety isn't just a slogan, it needs to be embedded into the fabric of the league, from how games called, how discipline is handled when players step over the line. And the CBA, that negotiation just became the most important in league history. Because of players are made it crystal clear they're done asking, they're demanding structural changes, not just higher salaries, but investments in infrastructure, in mental health support, in training staff and travel conditions, in the real quality of life issues that affect how they perform and how long their careers last. The new leadership, whoever is better, come prepared, because the days of using player for press tours and ignore concern behind closed doors are over. The league has a golden opportunity here to do it right, to rebuild trust, to show the sports world what leadership should look like: collaborative, transparent, and rooted in basketball knowledge, not corporate jargon. It starts by listening to Cunningham, to Collier, to every player who spoke up when it wasn't easy, who risked backlash, fine, and reputation to say we deserve better. And they do so. Here's where you come in, where you think of Engelbert stepping down. Should she have been removed earlier? What changes does a WNBA still need to make before the CBS arrives? And who should take over as commissioner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you, and make sure to hit the subscribe button, because we're not done yet. The fallout from this leadership shakeup is just getting started, and we'll be covering every twist, every quote, every decision, because when players speak up, we listen, and this time the league had no choice. But to do the same Cathy Engelbert fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, loud, and built brick by every player, every game, and every ignored warning sign into the entire structure. Crow embled what we're witnessing now as a result of years of disconnect between leadership and the locker room finally boiling over. And the one person who taught a lid off Sophie Cunningham the moment she sat down in front of that mic for exit interview. Everything shifted. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Blood, direct, no PR polish. She spoke with the full weight of frustration, not just on her own experience, but from a season where player concerns have been dismissed, minimized, or completely ignored. Sophie didn't just criticize Cathy Engelbert's leadership, she dismantled it. She laid out the issues that have been festering for far too long. Fishing felt random at best, and by its worst, complete lack of transparency around player safety, and a commissioner who, in her word, was disconnected from reality. The league she was supposed to let her voice became the spark, but the fire was already there, because this wasn't just about one bad call or one roof game. This was years of systemic neglect that exploded once the spotlight got hot enough. And let's be clear, it does get hot. The arrival of Caitlin Clark, the seasons and WNBA viewership into overdrive. The games were everywhere. Fans showed up in record numbers. Every tweet, every flag, foul, every press conference, it all went viral. And with that new level of visibility came a new level of scrutiny. The league wanted to celebrate the buzz. What they didn't count on that the cameras would also catch what players had been saying for years: miscuts, dangerous plays, inconsistent officiating, players being treated like assets, not people. All of it broadcasts and high definition, and fans weren't just watching, they were noticing. The problem was no longer just internal, it was public. And when the fans started backing the players, when media outlets began asking the same questions players have been yelling into avoid, the league lack of response became impossible to defend. That's when Nafisa Collier and had a chat. Her words were even more damning. She said what most athletes wouldn't dare, calling Cathy Engelbert's tenure the worst leadership in the world. That wasn't hyperbole, it wasn't heat of the moment, it was a deliberate statement by one of the league's top talents. Collier wasn't as venting, she was throwing down a challenge, and right behind her Lisa Leslie, a Hall of Famer, a foundational icon of the WNBA. When Lisa speaks, people listen, and what she said was simple: the players are right, things are broken, and they've been broken. The difference is now it's finally out in the open. For a while, Cathy Engelbert tried to ride the storm out. She issued soft 8 minutes lean on talking point about growth, investments, media deals. But that's exactly the disconnect the players were talking about. They weren't asking for PowerPoints. They were asking for protection, for real officiating standards, for commissioner who knew what was happening on the floor, not just what the numbers in boardroom. And then came the tipping point, the 2026 WNBA negotiations looming on the horizon, with players already warning, if nothing changes, we're not playing. Let's be honest, you don't get to that level of escalation unless people are done. That lockout threat wasn't posturing, it was real. And it wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about how long players expect to stay silent when are fined for speaking out, while ref go unchecked, while injuries pile up, and while leadership ducked behind and near as corporate approved press release. At that point, the writing was on the wall. Engelbert's support base had eroded, the players had lost confidence, the media had turned, and the fans, they weren't just frustrated, they were angry. Clips of missed calls, hard fouls, and tone-deaf interviews were circulating like wildfire. Even sponsors started asking questions. And so, without warning, it happened. Cathy Engelbert was gone. No dramatic press conference, no farewell tour, just a sudden statement from the league. Word of like a corporate resignation, but smelling more like a forced removal, the kind of exit that screams, we waited too long and now we're cleaning up the mess. But the players didn't celebrate, because this wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Cunningham said it best: no one's asking for perfection, they're asking for professionalism. They're asking for leadership that understand the game, understand the players, and understand that the WNBA success is not building press room, it's building sweat, pain, and sacrifice on the court. Would Engelbert out the lead now faces a crossroads. There's no hiding behind growth charts anymore. The question now is, will the next leader do it right? because the expectations have changed. The bar has been raised. Players aren't waiting for permission anymore. They're demanding to be involved in officiating process, in the disciplinary process, in the structure of the league that depends on them to survive. What this moment proves is that the power balance has shifted permanently, and it's about time. No more treating players like liabilities for being passionate. No more sweeping officiating controversies under the rug. No more prioritizing optics over impact. The message is clear: respect players or risk losing the entire machine. Caitlin Clark may have brought in a new wave of fans, but what kept them here? The players, all of them. The veterans, rookies, role players, the ones who play through pain, who speak up despite fines, who represent the lead with pride even when the lead doesn't always have their back. And now they've taken aback not just a narrative but the future. They didn't wait for a union rep. They didn't need a vote. They did it with their voice. Cases, with their platforms, with their willingness to risk backlash and say what needed to be said. That leadership, that's power, and that's the new standard for the WNBA. Believe as a chance now, a rare one, to rebuild from a place of authenticity, with players at the center, with transparency. He has a baseline. What a commissioner who's not afraid to get their hands dirty and actually fix what's broken. But that only happens they listen if they stop trying to control the story and start responding to it. If they stop managing players and start partnering with them, because the players are watching, the fans are watching. And no one's going back to silence. This is not just the end of Cathy Engelbert's run, it's the beginning of something else, something louder, sharper, real, or a league finally being held. The standard players have been carrying for decades, for years. They've been the backbone of this league, showing up, competing, representing a brand, even when the brand refused to represent them. But they've also been biting their tongues, choosing professionalism over protest, taking hits both literally and figuratively. Because that's how it is, until Sophie Cunningham flipped the table. Her exit interview wasn't just a statement, it was a seismic shift. It said out loud where too many have been told whisper behind closed doors. This league doesn't protect his players, not physically, now professionally, not even politically. And the person who should been doing all that, Cathy Engelbert, wasn't as asleep at the wheel. She drove the car into a wall, then blamed the rearview mirror while players were getting hit with dirty screens and taking flagrant contact. She was on national TV talking about revenue growth while fans flooded comments section begging for officiating reforms. She was promoting merged drops and media partnerships. There was always something shiny or flashier, easier to focus on an actual basketball being played. The reality: she was never built for this job. She was hired to run the WNBA like a business, and maybe she succeeded at that. But this isn't just a business, it's a league, a locker room, a battlefield, a culture. And if you can't walk into that locker room and look the players in the eye after a game where they bled for your brand and were met with silence, you don't belong here. That's what Sophie tapped into. It wasn't just about Caitlin Clark, although the mishandling of Clark's debut season was certainly the final nail in the coffin. It was about all of it: the patterns, the indifference, the gaslighting, watching players drag for standing up for themselves, mission, or sat back, smile politely, and weight of the noise died down. Except this time it didn't, because Sophie wasn't alone. Nifty's a call you're dropped kind of quote that rewrite history books. Worst leadership in the world isn't something you say casually, that a line in the sand, that a warning shot. And when someone like Collier speaks with that kind of clarity, everyone pays attention. Because she's not the player who usually makes headlines, she's a player who let her game speak. So when she talks in matters at it, and Lisa Leslie be back in mop, and suddenly the silence became deafening, not from the players but from the top. That's what finally broke the league's tolerance for Engelbert. Not one scandal, not one bad decision, but a sustained public loss of faith. The commissioner of a league can survive mistakes. What they can survive when the players, the fans, and the legends all turn and say you're not leading anymore. Engelbert's exit wasn't as expected, it was overdue, and now the WNBA is in transition. But this time it's not about rebranding, it's about restructuring, rebuilding trust, listening, but for speaking, protecting before promoting, because the players just made it clear this league is ours now. No more being man is like assets, no more being left to explain officiating mistakes to reporters, no more being told be grateful for growth while flying commercial and rehabbing injuries without proper care. The WNBA is at a breaking point or breakthrough, and it depends on what comes next. Whoever takes over as commissioner has to understand you're not inheriting a brand, you're inheriting a revolution.